Thanks, Rob. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone at Bitcoin Park. This has been amazing. I'll probably speak for everybody in saying that. So thanks for having us. All right. I am joined by two real experts on policy. I'm somewhat new to the industry. I've been with BPI for about 3 years. BPI, for those who aren't familiar, is the Bitcoin Policy Institute. We're a 501c3 think tank researching Bitcoin and emerging monetary networks. And I'm here with two gentlemen who know way more than I do, so I'm going to let them talk more than I talk. But first, I want to let you two introduce yourselves for those who don't know you, and then we'll jump into the content. So, Michael, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, great. Thanks everyone for having us, and Rod for putting us on. My name is Michael Sullivan. I am the principal at White Oak Strategies, which is a firm I started about a month ago. Prior to that, I spent the last 6 years now with Senator Bill Hagerty. I was his campaign manager, and then running his state operation, and now I'm a senior advisor to him on his campaign and some other policy issues. But have been working with Rod here, trying to help grow some elected official awareness about what's going on at Bitcoin Park, understand issues around Bitcoin, making sure they understand that there's a difference between Bitcoin and crypto. Don't say crypto. But yeah, so excited to be here. Excited to be a panelist. I've been a moderator before, but being a panelist is
I saw your job.
yeah, great.
There we go. I'm Warple. I head up payments and hardware policy for Block. Hopefully everyone knows who Block is, but Square, Cash App, Proto, Britkey, etc. So what does that mean? So I spend a lot of time in DC speaking to policymakers, helping to educate, but also advocating for different policies. So for example, and thanks to Rod's support here, our major policy is making Bitcoin everyday money. So that involves hoping for a de minimis strategy. Previously, I was actually in the UK government. You can tell I'm not from this nation, although trying to be part of it. So I spent some time working in government before coming back outside. So yeah, and I just want to say before we start, thanks to Rod and the team, this is an incredible conference. I can tell you that the signal here is indeed just out of this world. And hopefully, yeah, we can also be as honest as I've seen the other panelists be. So really excited.
I love it. All right, I want to kind of kick things off speaking to one of the themes that we've heard about a lot yesterday, which is obviously the intersection of Bitcoin mining and AI and HPC. I think one of the trends that we saw a lot or heard a lot about in DC this year is, again, that intersection between AI, HPC, Bitcoin mining, and building out of basically generation, right? And that's something we talked a lot about yesterday. And I think one of the major undertones for that is always the competition with China, national security. I was looking at some statistics just preparing for this panel, and since 2020, the total compute or capacity in China has grown by about 30%. And over that same time period in the United States, it's grown about 5%. And so we're getting, our cattle put, in front of us, and we need to make sure that we're keeping up with them. And I think that's something that the Trump administration is taking pretty seriously. And Michael, I want to kick off with you. One of the things that Trump said during the campaign sort of trail was, we want all of the Bitcoin to be mined in America, right? And that was a big shock to all of us. We're like, whoa, you got a bunch of, Bitcoin mining CEOs down in Mar-a-Lago, and all of a sudden he's, tweeting about Bitcoin mining. I think we were all like, okay, this guy's like, he can't be serious, right? It seems like maybe he was serious. I'm curious if you think he was serious, and if you think that was sort of more of a campaign promise or actual sort of signaling of what U.S. kind of power policy was going to look like.
Yeah, I think he was serious when he said it, and I'll note that round table at Mar-a-Lago with the Bitcoin miner sitting there next to him was Senator Bill Hagerty, pulled into the meeting, and I think what Trump recognized in that conversation, and what we need to emphasize among policymakers in Washington D.C. is that Bitcoin mining, not only is it important, and we should ensure that you're not seeing this piling up of Bitcoin by Chinese mining companies or foreign adversaries, but is that it lays the groundwork for us to build grid resiliency, build more energy production, provide the framework and lay the groundwork for AI dominance as well. It's something we've been trying to talk about with the TVA, with power producers, with local governments, just trying to educate other policymakers as well. Is this general misconception of data center is a data center? There's multiple different types of data centers, and Bitcoin mining shouldn't be grouped up with this. Up in about 45 minutes north of here in Gallatin, Meta's got a massive data center that holds all of our grandparents' memes, and that's about it. And it's constantly running. And when we had Winter Storm Elliott a couple years ago come through here, it kept running. It didn't scale down. It didn't participate in any sort of curtailment programs. Meanwhile, Harry Sudock, I think I'd met Harry that shortly after Winter Storm Elliott, and he showed me all of their mining operations and how in 15 minutes they powered down. And there's this misconception out there that that Bitcoin mining facilities are these power hungry, take all the power from grandma in the middle of a winter storm. But it's simply not true. And as you educate policymakers, as Trump understood, hey, this is Bitcoin mining provides that power demand during off-peak hours, allows us to have a explanation or reason of, hey, we need to build more energy production because off-peak capacity is growing. We need to build more power generation. And then on top of that, it builds the framework for AI to come in. And I think that the CEO of CoreWeave made the comment of, it's way easier to convert a Bitcoin mining facility into an AI data center than it is to build an AI data center. And so when you understand those components and you see, okay, wait, if we can put Bitcoin mining facilities all across the US and mine all of the Bitcoin in the US, we also can start to convert as the mining becomes more spread out or less profitable, and mining firms start to make this switch to AI, which, we heard that conversation some yesterday, that we have the infrastructure to become AI dominant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's obviously the angle that I think we was wanting to go down there. I think the other angle that's worth worth discussing, and I'll turn it over to Will for this, is I think about there were some statistics that about half of our GDP growth last year was coming from AI, right? The 2% of the total 4% growth was attributed to AI. And I think there's obviously, right, there's the national security element of how's our grid doing, but also how are we growing as a country? I'm curious, as you're kind of having conversations with policymakers, especially in DC, what's the weighting of that? Are they concerned more with our sort of national competitiveness? Is it national security? And what's really like the basis of those conversations?
Yeah, excellent question. So I would maybe go back to maybe 2021, 2022. And I think that back then it was environmental issues were top of mind. We saw a lot of attacks, a lot of kind of complexities, to the point where President Biden proposed a digital asset mining tax, which essentially would have, for every X dollar of power you use, you have to pay an excise tax. It was all environment. I think what's changed is that the AI has opened up an opportunity for Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining to explain, as Michael was saying, why it's contributing to the grid. And that's a rising tide. I think if you look at abundance narratives on the Dems, you look at energy power narratives on the Republicans, there's a ginormous opportunity for Bitcoin mining to explain we support grid build out, we keep the lights on, we keep people flowing. Now, what is the rub to that? We've kind of maybe got a little over the environmental issues. We've got over the electricity issues. The complexity now is that when you say we're critical to the grids and we're critical to the build out and we co-locate with AI, policymakers and regulators are talking to us and saying, okay, what's in that box? I want to know what's in that box today. And so what we're hearing from them is, where's your supply chains? Where are you getting it from? Can you verify what's in your machines? Who are you dealing with? Where are they based? And importantly, it's not just hardware, it's firmware. When we're doing reliability, when you are co-locating, when you are doing grid load management and ramping down in 15 minutes, how do I know you're going to do that each time? How do I know your software is viable enough to do that? And so I think actually we are hearing a great push towards not just kind of trust, but people having to go to the regulators and policymakers and show them how it works. Which, I had a great panel yesterday on open source. open source is the obvious answer here for a lot of policymakers. So at the same time, we're not only talking about that verifiability of hardware and software, you're also getting a chance to upskill policymakers in the value of open source more widely. So I think it's a very kind of positive space. I think it's changed a lot, but the national security concerns, because Bitcoin is now critical national infrastructure, so supporting grids, supporting co-location, is something that is under discussed, but is only going to grow in importance and trends in the next couple of years. My closing thought here is that it's time for the industry to get ahead of that before you're regulated. There is sort of organizations, kind of self-regulatory organizations that we see across the space. And what they do very smartly is they say, like, don't worry about us. We're a clever industry. We know what we're doing. We know your concerns. Here's how we're getting ahead of it. And so although politics, I think it can be like that happens over there, it's always happening to you. And it's a question of how you engage, you get ahead of the narratives and show what you're doing, rather than kind of get to concerns. Because that's when in the US, that's when you get regulated. That's when you get negative policy.
I'd add on to too is also thinking through what negatives that they can come up with. You'd be impressed at what some of the policymakers can think of what could go wrong. I heard one suggest is explain to them the being able to power down a Bitcoin mining facility in minutes. It was, well, why can't China hack that and power it up in minutes and overpower the grid during a winter storm? And so it was like, okay, we can find someone who can explain to you how that's not going to happen. But, you got to be able to think through what scenarios they can come up with as well.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting line, actually. I also think there is ways for industry to also, like, education is always key. Like, unfortunately, if you look at a policymaker, these guys, they're doing 100 things. So Senator Blackburn, for example, knows the industry really well. Senator Blackburn is also thinking about, how do we fund the government next year? How do I keep the US safe next year? Frankly, like, what's my personal life? She's running for governor. These members and staffs, as you all know, they do 100 things. And so if it's frustrating, I appreciate to be like, well, we know what we're talking about. We've told you a million times. So I think education is always key. And as part of that, and I think Rod's done a fantastic kind of job here, because it's also about being genuine with your policymakers. Policymakers want to hear from their constituents, but they want to hear from constituents and explain, like, what you're doing for your community, what you're doing for your local area, how you're supporting activations in their state, in their area. So I think it's also it's thinking through the negatives, thinking through the kind of problems there, but identifying your positives. And maybe one example I have is this was actually in Texas. There was one of the major miners, and it was a winter storm, and they released, I think it was a press release, and the press release read something like, if everyone's familiar, ERCOT basically have a load program where you can get paid to shut down for a while. And they released a press release, and it said, oh, last month we earned X million in fees from ERCOT. And I read this, and I literally had to go for like a lap around New York. I was like, I need to sit down, have a coffee. The option there was not to be like, we made X million. The option there was like, last month we kept X hospitals online. We kept X homes light. We did this. Name me other people who can do this. So I think it's also thinking through the opportunities, thinking through the positive narratives, and also be ready to counter the negatives through action. So it's a two-sided here, but I think having spoken to people here, the energy and passion is the absolute key of policymakers. If I could ask anything from anyone I ever in a meeting with, just be yourself, be energetic, be passionate. That's what the key is.
That's awesome. I think the to get kind of more into the nuts and bolts here, Will, I want to go back to you. If you had to put together basically like a responsible like operator kind of like packet or like resources, maybe this is a tough question, but what are kind of like the key things in there, especially for this room here of, okay, I'm gonna go talk to a policymaker. Here are the things that like I can sort of describe to them that will be both kind of like interesting and important to them that obviously they might not already know.
Yeah, excellent question. So I think we've touched on this a little. I think, and I know there's a lot of like medium and smaller companies here, which I think is you have an opportunity here. So it's firstly about targeting. I think I see a lot of the times there are some very well-known policymakers in the area who are fantastic advocates for our industry. Senator Lummis is a fantastic advocate. She knows her stuff, expertly. She's advocating for the industry. I think it's looking at where can you make an impact. So if you're in a state and you have a senator or a rep or even a local representative from the state house, it's looking at like, okay, I have a voice, I have a stake, they have to talk to me. How can I make an impact on the margins? So yes, meet Santa Lomas, for example, but make sure you're meeting your local person, your local rep from your state. And then I think it comes back to what we were talking about. It's definitely looking at, what jobs are you bringing? What community build out are you bringing? Like, are you doing internships? Are you offering technical skills? Are you funneling people through to like further education studies? Like, what does that look like for the community? It's also how you're giving back. I think that, this is, I think I've seen lots of miners do this, which is like, they are based in rural areas. And what they're really good at saying is like, we recognize that we have, brought opportunity back, but we also have brought back a new sports stadium. We've brought back a new sports hall. We've brought back new stuff for the community. And yes, that is, that's money you have to spend today. It's frustrating. You have to go spend that. But the payoff for that is long-term relationships, openness, and trust. It shows you're not just here to make a quick buck, but you're here to like add something. And then I just to say that again with, being a responsible operator, I think increasingly it's turning up with your facts and your figures and your verifiability. It's saying like, here's where I get my machines. Here's what's in them. Here's how I know it's safe. Here's my like plans, procedures for operating and working through. So just coming proactively, coming with a sort of ideas, and then coming with a wider benefit beyond your bottom line is going to get you so far in initial conversations, and just building from there with them.
Michael, I want to ask you a similar question. Obviously, you being on maybe the other side of this kind of responsible operator kind of education. You made a comment earlier that also with Bitcoin mining, there's a lot of things that they're concerned about on the national security side of, hey, if China hacks us, can they take out these kind of critical nodes in our power network? Is there something that operators here can do to kind of help you? Obviously you understand, but a lot of the folks maybe you work with don't. Is there something that the folks in this room can kind of help educate on, talk about, how they're operating, and maybe even change their operations to make sure that those kind of concerns are sort of assuaged?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a lot of it. It still all comes down to education, and being upfront with policymakers, and I mean, you have varying levels of policymakers of where your focus should be. The local level, they're going to be concerned about noise, power consumption. Are you, well, you're building a data center. You guys are going to destroy our roads with your big trucks carrying all your equipment, and being able to meet them on that level, explain, be proactive, get to them before paperwork is filed, before permits are requested, things like that. At the federal level, it's much higher level thinking. They're not wondering about road damage. They're wondering about like grid resiliency. They're wondering about where the machines are from, how close are they to national security assets? Is there cyber threats with it? The other thing too is like, Bitcoin mining is up there in their brains in the same space as AI, but your AI computers are way different than your ASICs. And so it is explaining to them like, well, this machine just mine. That's it. I can't get email on this. I can't play solitaire on it. It just mines Bitcoin, and explaining like this machine isn't going to also be able to hack Oak Ridge National Lab if China gets into it and tries to change the focus. That's impossible. It is. You don't have to orange pill every policymaker. You've just got to be able to assure them that you pose no threat.
Can I add a thought to that too? I think I appreciate that policy can sound really intimidating. Like we suggested, go meet this person, talk about this, talk in that ways. And, you guys are also trying to build businesses, innovate ideas, all of that sort of stuff. I will say there's beauty in numbers here. So even at Block, we have the privilege and the resources for me to think full time about policy. We have a policy team. We're very lucky. Even we think the best way to do this sort of stuff is as a group. So there'll be, trade associations in your state. There's trade associations at a national level. I know we have a Texas Blockchain Council here. If anyone's based in Texas, fantastic organization. You can band together and say, okay, how do we feel as an industry? How do we speak as an industry? What do we want to get across? And these organizations are set up to, do that at extremely affordable membership levels. In DC, similar, there's a number of organizations, and they will, do the logistics for you, do some of the planning for you. So it's intimidating. I think the message maybe I'd say is, put some time and effort to it, but also think about how you can maximize your impact through kind of community stuff, as well as having that time to, think about the one or two people in your state, in your area, you can make an impact with today. So, yeah, before everyone thinks they have to do an entire policy program.
There are some good government relations firms out there that also do some of that work.
I love it. Follow-up question as to kind of continue on this thread of collaboration with policymakers, and Will, I'll go to you first on this. To what extent do your conversations with policymakers actually kind of like influence your operations, right? Like, obviously the fact that I started with today about our, capacity growth in total energy capacity. Obviously policymakers should be realizing by now, and I know for a fact that they are, that Bitcoin mining can help to accelerate that. That's something, we've been talking about here for many years. Is that influencing your operation? Are you saying, hey, we're going to go into these projects that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been monetized or even started, and we're going to maybe not Block, but other Bitcoin miners go in and say, hey, we're going to help you bootstrap this? Like, is there kind of a collaboration effort there?
A little bit. I think that, so a Block here, as you say, we primarily produce the hardware, but we work a lot with those companies. So, for example, we try and do, co-meetings where, we have somebody who's using our equipment on the ground, and we can speak about how two companies, we're providing those benefits. I think the bottom line is, like, nobody does a project unless it's actually worth their time doing it. I think that talking to policymakers can change the calculators on the edges. So it can say, like, yeah, this is kind of working for us, maybe not. If it's going to be a ginormous benefit for your relationship, or ginormous benefit, yes, you may add up to it. But I think that actually doing a whole project just to please a policymaker is yeah, I think that the major tech firms do it, like Google, Apple, but their budgets are just to the nth degree extreme, and they can afford to just drop millions on please keep happy. I think the main thing is that it comes down actually to assessing options. So, for example, if you are, let's say you want to buy a facility of someone, I would always recommend doing the background checks on the previous concerns, opportunities with that facility. So, for example, like, has there been noise complaints? Did the previous operator, run it in a way that maybe was, upsetting the community? What did they say about their previous operation? Like, what did they do to build that out? If you have to also spend time, not just, installing new machines, thinking about how to expand any operation, but also having to rebuild trust with community, that could influence your decision quite dramatically. And then on the plus side, if you have something that's working really well, that's all fine. And maybe this is your first time doing a bigger project, you want to do more policy. That's a great place to learn too. That's a great opportunity to see, like, what works here, why does it work, what do we need in an organization to make that work. So I think that it's on the edges, and it's something that definitely should be in discussions on any project you're doing. But I think that keep focusing on building good business, because they will speak for themselves. The innovation, the opportunity, sort of adding to the grid, for example, in reliable ways, that will speak for itself, until, of course, until you get to the $1 billion+ stage, and then we can talk about how to do one-off projects to keep people happy.
Yeah. All right. We're kind of coming up on time here, and so I want to wrap up the conversation with some really actionable steps for this room. Obviously, your time with Senator Haggerty should help us understand, as a community here, as a sort of like beginner interactor with policy, right? For a lot of us in this room, I'm sure, having a conversation with a policymaker seems sort of daunting and abstract. If you were to sort of write a beginner's guide for this room and any room really, what are the things to do? Like, what are the actionable steps to have those conversations, and what do those conversations look like when they're successful?
Yeah, we always joked when we set up our state operation was that no one really knew why to call a senator's office, or who to call, or what for. The reality is that their office, a lot of federal offices are set up in this, like, we're here, call if you need something. So, like, you call them. Most of the calls they get are to complain about, what they're doing wrong. But they've got staff that will answer the call, will come out and meet you. For some of the smaller operations, that's maybe the first step is just, hey, can you send someone on your team out to our site? I want to show you and show you what my Bitcoin mining facility is like. And it's an opportunity for them to educate themselves. It's an opportunity for them to get out in their community, meet some new people. But there's, to your point about how, these policymakers have so much on their plate. There's always someone on the staff that is has that policy portfolio, and eventually the conversation gets there. The idea that you could pick up the phone and call your congressman or call your senator's office and say, "Hey, I want the senator to come to my site," like it's unrealistic. It probably took me 2 years to get the senator out to Harry's site out in Maynardville, Tennessee. And it was a long process of making sure that our team understood what a Bitcoin mining facility is, understood what investment that they were making in the state, how many jobs it created, why it was important. So it's, sometimes it may feel like you're starting at the bottom. You can call a county mayor, you can call, your county commissioner, and you're going to get them and you're going to figure it out. But congressman, governor, senator, you're going to have to start at the staff level. And I always have a rule of never take no from someone who can't give you a yes. So if the field staffer can't tell you, yeah, I'll have the senator come, I assure you, the field staffer can never tell you, oh yeah, we'll get that on the calendar. They don't have the ability to say yes to get that policymaker there. There's someone above them, and you've just got to continue to work through the chain. But the education starts at the bottom level.
Will, I want to put it to you too. On the industry side, what are things that have worked for you? Obviously you're scaled up pretty high with your team and you've got a bunch of folks working with you, but just for a sort of beginner first time conversation, like what are the tips for making sure that that's a success?
Honestly, bring your hardware. I think the Bitcoin mining industry has a huge advantage in that you can touch and feel the product. People, when they talk about Bitcoin, the average policymaker is like, money flying around above my head on a blockchain with what's going on. And then I remember we did a tour of Congress back in December, and the team brought with them one of our chips. This chip is like this big, and it came in a lovely plastic box. And we got into this fantastic routine where we'd explain what Proto was, what you do, how it is, and then my colleague would whip out this box and be like, "Do you want to see one of the most advanced chips in the world?" And no matter who it was, every staff policymaker would be like, "Oh my God." And I was like, when you think of AI, this is similar. This is the same sort of technology. Honestly, bring your hardware and be passionate. I think the other thing I'd say is that I would maybe try and set a blank slate in your mind. I think that understandably, when the Bitcoin community thinks of policy, I think they think of it as like, they hate us, they're coming for us, they've come for us in the past, this is it. Bitcoin, what I'd say is in 2026, I would draw a blank slate. I think there is ginormous opportunity right now. You're not AI, you're not doing all that stuff. You have a great story to tell about energy. You are, adding jobs, adding community benefits, you're adding loads, you're kind of supporting America kind of energy dominance. And you're also building an alternative payment network. You're challenging like the biggest banks, you're challenging Visa, MasterCard, you're challenging all of the ways in which money flows today of tomorrow. And so look at it as an opportunity to be talking about, why you're different, why you're new, and be aware of the upside. So don't maybe adopt a defensive position, but be really passionate. And the last thing I'd say too is just keep it straightforward. I think that, we've all read the white paper, for example. I think just go back to the benefits today. I don't think people need to understand the philosophical behind it stuff, for example, like sovereignty, stuff like that. I don't think you need to talk about, P2P, the vision, stuff like that. Just be like, what we're doing is we're lowering costs for merchants. We are supporting a grid. We are helping that build out. We're keeping it safe, secure. And we're doing this at the same time about taking banks and big players out of the equation. Keep it like on the ground for those folks. And just recognize the opportunity. And I think there's a huge one. So I would encourage everyone to think about who you want to talk to, how you want to explain your operation, how you want to explain your business, because that's how you're going to educate, that's how you're going to make an impact. And that's how together, I think, Bitcoin mining can make a real positive impact on policy.
Fantastic. All right. Last question. You got 60 seconds. What's your pitch for everybody in this room to go engage with their policymakers?
I mean, it's pick up the phone and make the call. It's just, it's really that easy to get a hold of a Senate office, to get a hold of a congressional office. Governor's offices are all a little bit different state by state. and how you get a hold. Some of them have field staffs, some of them don't. But it's just picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, I want to educate you guys about this. Give me an opportunity."
Yeah, we have a philosophy at Block of starting small, giving it soul. I think that's a really good thing. Just start locally, start picking up the phone, just pick somebody and go for it. And if that doesn't work, just push and push and push. And then make sure you're just focusing on, telling your story and being passionate and letting yourself come through. So yeah, just go for it, and you'll learn along the way. It can be a lot of fun. I enjoy it. I do it full time. And I think that, getting to talk about your products in new, fresh ways is also exciting. So just start.
Fantastic. I mean, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you all for listening, and